The morning sun cut through the marble headstones of Arlington National Cemetery like a sniper's laser designator seeking its target. Staff Sergeant Reese Catherine Marlo stood motionless before a white granite marker, her shadow stretching long across the perfectly manicured grass. She was 24 years old, but her eyes carried decades more weight than her birth certificate suggested. The inscription was brief, clinical. Lieutenant Daniel Harrison Marlo, United States Army Rangers, born March 15, 1999, died August 23, 2021, Afghanistan, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. What the stone didn't say was that Daniel had died in his sister's arms, that his blood had soaked into the Afghan dust while Reese screamed for a medevac that arrived 4 minutes too late, that the intelligence that placed his patrol in that particular valley at that particular time had been deliberately falsified by an enemy commander whose name she would learn only months later, General Khalid al-Rahman. Reese's right hand moved unconsciously to her left forearm, where Daniel's dog tags hung on a thin silver chain beneath her uniform sleeve. She had worn them every day for 2 years, 7 months, and 14 days. The metal was warm against her skin, always warm, as if her brother's life still pulsed through the stamped steel. "They said I couldn't handle the distance," she whispered to the headstone. "I told them distance is just math with consequences." A shadow fell across Daniel's grave. Reese didn't turn. She knew the footsteps, measured, deliberate. The walk of a man who had spent 50 years making every movement count. "He would have been proud of you, Staff Sergeant." Colonel Thaddeus Ashford stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, his frame still commanding despite 68 years of hard living. His dress uniform displayed ribbons that told stories of conflicts most Americans had forgotten: Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm. His face was weathered leather stretched over granite, and his eyes were the pale blue of high-altitude ice. Those eyes had seen men die, had ordered men to their deaths, had carried the weight of those decisions for half a century without bending. "Colonel," Reese acknowledged. She didn't salute. Arlington wasn't the place for military formality. It was the place where formality came to die, leaving only memory and grief. "Your grandfather used to stand exactly like that," Ashford said. "Colonel William Marlo, Normandy, 1944. I was 16 when I met him, fresh-faced kid at Fort Benning, eager to prove I could shoot. Your grandfather was teaching advanced marksmanship to Korean War volunteers. He stood like a statue when he aimed, like time itself stopped between heartbeats." Reese finally turned. "You never told me you knew him personally." "Didn't seem relevant until now." Ashford's expression was unreadable. "Your grandfather held an unofficial record for 79 years, 2,100 yards. D-Day, June 6, 1944. One shot, one German officer coordinating artillery fire on Omaha Beach. They classified it because the brass deemed it statistically impossible. Couldn't have stories circulating that might seem like propaganda or fiction. The number hung between them like a challenge. 2,100 yards, nearly a mile and a quarter. With a World War II-era M1 Garand rifle, iron sights, manual calculations, no laser rangefinders, no ballistic computers, no modern optics, just mathematics, physics, and a steady hand." "Why are you telling me this now?" Reese asked. Ashford pulled a manila folder from beneath his uniform jacket. The cover was stamped with classifications that didn't officially exist. "Because you're about to break his record, and unlike him, you're going to do it where it matters most." 8 months earlier, the Marlo family ranch sprawled across 1,200 acres of Texas hill country, 40 miles northwest of Austin. The land had been in the family since 1876, purchased by Reese's great-great-grandfather, with money earned driving cattle from San Antonio to Kansas railheads. 4 generations of Marlos had worked this soil, raised cattle and children, and sent their sons, and eventually their daughters, to serve their country. The shooting range sat on the property's western edge, carved into a natural valley that provided a clear line of sight extending 2,500 yards. Reese's grandfather had built it in 1952, using surveying equipment borrowed from the Army Corps of Engineers. He had designed it to replicate the distances and angles he'd encountered in Normandy, a training ground where he could maintain the skills that had kept him alive through 3 years of European combat. Reese had fired her first shot on this range when she was 6 years old. Her father, Dr. Harrison Marlo, had steadied the rifle, a youth model .22 caliber bolt action, while her grandfather adjusted her stance. She remembered the weight of the weapon against her small shoulder, the smell of gun oil and summer grass, the way her grandfather's calloused hands had guided hers with surprising gentleness. "Breathe in," he had instructed. "Exhale half. Hold. Between heartbeats, there's a moment of perfect stillness. That's when you squeeze." She had missed the target by 6 inches. Her grandfather had smiled. "Excellent first shot. Now let's talk about why you missed and how we fix it." For the next 12 years, they had talked about little else. Harrison Marlo taught her the physics, trajectory, gravity, air resistance, the Coriolis effect that made bullets drift right in the northern hemisphere due to Earth's rotation. Her mother, Professor Eleanor Marlo, taught her the mathematics, differential equations, vector calculus, statistical probability. Between them, they transformed shooting from art into science, from instinct into engineering. By 18, Reese could calculate a bullet's flight path in her head faster than most soldiers could read the data from a ballistic computer. By 20, she had graduated top of her class from Army Sniper School, breaking every range record in the process. By 22, she had 23 confirmed kills across 5 deployments, each one recorded in classified files that would never see public acknowledgement. They called her Phantom because targets simply stopped living without ever knowing she had existed. But then Daniel had died in her arms in an Afghan valley, and Reese learned that all the precision in the world meant nothing when the intelligence sending you into battle was deliberately wrong. She had taken a 6-month leave, returned to the ranch, spent her days calculating trajectories on paper, filling notebook after notebook with equations that all solved for the same variable: justice through precision. When Colonel Ashford called with the mission briefing, Reese had been waiting. She had known somehow that the opportunity would come. The universe had a way of providing such symmetries to those patient enough to wait for them. The Pentagon briefing room had no windows, no decorations, no personality, just a long table, 6 chairs, and a digital display screen that showed satellite imagery of a compound somewhere in the Middle Eastern desert. Reese sat ramrod straight in her chair, uniform crisp despite the previous 14 hours of travel. Across from her sat Admiral Thomas Beckworth, a man whose face suggested he had forgotten how to smile sometime during the Reagan administration. To Beckworth's left was Colonel Ashford. To his right, a CIA analyst whose name Reese hadn't caught and suspected was false anyway. "Staff Sergeant Marlo," Beckworth began, his voice carrying the Boston accent he'd never quite shed despite 40 years in the service. "Your file makes interesting reading. 23 confirmed eliminations across 5 combat deployments. Perfect operational security. Not one target ever detected your presence. Psychological evaluations describe you as emotionally stable but singularly focused. Your instructors at sniper school called you a savant with ballistics. One of them wrote, and I quote, "SSG Marlo doesn't shoot targets. She solves them like mathematical proofs." Reese said nothing. Responding to compliments was a waste of breath. Beckworth gestured to the screen. "This compound is located in the Kandahar province. According to intelligence gathered over 6 months, 3 high-value targets are scheduled to meet there in 72 hours. These individuals represent the senior leadership of an organization responsible for coordinating attacks that have killed 247 coalition personnel over the past 18 months. The screen shifted. three faces appeared. General Khalid al-Rahman, operations commander, responsible for strategic planning across multiple theaters. Reese's heartbeat, which had been maintaining a steady 60 beats per minute, didn't change. Her breathing remained controlled, but something cold and sharp unfolded in her chest cavity, a blade of ice seeking a target. She knew that face, had studied it for months, knew the scar above his left eyebrow, the slight asymmetry of his nose from a break that had healed improperly, the way his eyes never quite aligned when he smiled. This was the man who had sent false intelligence to coalition forces, the man whose deliberate lies had placed Daniel's patrol in an ambush site, the man who had killed her brother. General Omar Nazari, Beckworth continued, logistics coordinator, controls supply lines and materiel distribution. And General Faisal Qasim, intelligence chief, responsible for counterintelligence operations and internal security. Beckworth leaned forward. Joint Special Operations Command wants these targets eliminated simultaneously. Their deaths would decapitate enemy command structure and effectively end organized resistance in the region. This isn't about revenge, Staff Sergeant. This is about saving thousands of coalition lives by removing the individuals coordinating attacks against them. What's the operational plan? Reese asked. Her voice was steady, professional. SEAL Team 6 will handle infiltration and reconnaissance, Ashford said. Your role is long-range observation, and if the opportunity presents itself, target elimination. The compound sits on elevated terrain. Closest concealed observation point is approximately 2,200 yards away. 2,200 yards. The number was both challenge and promise. Rules of engagement? Reese asked. If you have clear shots on all three targets within a viable window, you are authorized to engage, Beckworth said. This is priority alpha clearance, presidential authorization. But understand, the range exceeds standard doctrine for effective sniper engagement by nearly 800 yards. Commander Blackwood, who leads the SEAL element, has expressed skepticism about including Army personnel on his operation. You'll need to prove your value to earn his trust. Skepticism is reasonable, Reese said. I'll address it operationally. Ashford caught her eye. Something unspoken passed between them. A shared understanding that went beyond the briefing, beyond the mission parameters. He knew. He knew that Reese recognized Rahman's face, knew what this target meant to her personally. After the briefing concluded and the others filed out, Ashford remained. Walk with me, he said. They moved through corridors designed to confuse foreign intelligence, taking turns that seemed random, but followed a pattern Ashford had memorized decades ago. Finally, they reached a small office that smelled of old coffee and older secrets. Ashford closed the door. General Khalid al-Rahman, he said quietly, August 23rd, 2021. He personally fed false intelligence to coalition forces, indicating that a high-value target would be at specific coordinates in the Kandahar province. Your brother's patrol was redirected to investigate. The entire operation was an ambush designed to draw in American forces and eliminate them. Reese's hands, which had been loose at her sides, slowly curled into fists. You've known this for how long? Her voice was barely above a whisper. 6 months. We needed confirmation through multiple intelligence channels before I could brief you. Rahman doesn't know we've identified him as a source. He considers that operation one of his greatest successes. Killed 6 American soldiers, wounded 11 more, and the coalition never realized they'd been deliberately manipulated. Why tell me now? Ashford's pale eyes held hers. Because you need to know what you're walking into. This isn't just another mission for you. It's personal. And personal feelings get soldiers killed. He paused. Your grandfather once told me something I've never forgotten. He said, anger blinds, mathematics clarifies. When you're behind the rifle, forget the man and remember the math. Can you do that? Reese was silent for 10 seconds. 15, 20. Yes, she finally said. This isn't revenge. It's justice served at 2,247 yards. Ashford nodded slowly. I've been watching your career for 6 years, Staff Sergeant. Since you graduated sniper school. I knew your grandfather. Trained under him when I was younger than you are now. He taught me that true precision isn't just about hitting targets. It's about hitting the right targets at the right time for the right reasons. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a weathered leather journal. This belonged to him. His shooting log from Normandy through the end of World War II. He wanted you to have it when you were ready. Reese accepted the journal with both hands, feeling the weight of history in the cracked leather binding. There's an entry from June 6, 1944, Ashford said. The shot from Omaha Beach. Read it when you have time. Then decide if you want this mission for the right reasons. Commander Garrett Blackwood had the kind of face that cameras loved and enemies feared. Square jaw, steel gray eyes, a scar running from his left temple to his cheekbone, courtesy of shrapnel in Fallujah. At 38, he was one of the youngest SEAL Team 6 commanders in history, having earned his position through 16 years of operations in every combat theater where America had interests. He did not appreciate having an Army sergeant attached to his team. Let me be clear, Blackwood said, standing in front of his assembled 8-man team at Coronado Naval Base. We don't babysit. We don't accommodate. We don't adjust our operational tempo for personnel who can't keep up. If you're here, you perform at SEAL standards, or you don't perform at all. Am I understood? 7 SEALs nodded. Reese remained motionless, Blackwood's eyes fixed on her. Staff Sergeant Marlo, your file says you're qualified. Files say a lot of things. I need to see capability, not paperwork. Understood, sir, Reese said. Chief Sterling will escort you to the range. You'll demonstrate proficiency at 1,200 yards. 3 targets, variable wind conditions. SEAL snipers qualify at these distances. If you can't match our standards, this conversation ends and you return to whatever Army posting will have you. Chief Petty Officer Donovan Sterling was 45, built like a fire hydrant, and had eyes that suggested he'd seen things that would make lesser men weep. He'd been a SEAL for 23 years, served as a combat medic and spotter, and earned 2 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star for actions he was legally prohibited from discussing. He led Reese to the range without speaking. The setup was straightforward. 3 silhouette targets at 1,200 yards. Wind flags indicated 12 to 15 mile-per-hour crosswinds from the northwest. Temperature was 78 degrees, humidity 42%. Standard conditions for an expert marksman. Challenging conditions for anyone else. Sterling handed Reese a rifle, a Remington 700 chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, equipped with a Night Force scope. Service weapon for SEAL snipers. She checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, clearing the chamber, examining the bore, testing the trigger pull. When you're ready, Sterling said. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were evaluating. Always evaluating. Reese settled into prone position. The rifle's stock met her shoulder with familiar pressure. Her cheek found the weld point on the stock. Her breathing slowed. Through the scope, the first target crystallized into sharp focus. She ran calculations automatically. Range, 1,200 yards. Wind, 14 miles per hour from 310 degrees. Temperature and humidity would affect air density. Elevation differential, minimal. Coriolis effect at this range, negligible but present. Roughly 2.3 inches of drift. Her first shot broke clean. The bullet's flight time was approximately 1.4 seconds. Impact, center mass on target 1. Sterling grunted. Acceptable. Reese cycled the bolt, acquiring target 2. This one was slightly offset, presenting a narrower profile. She adjusted her point of aim by 0.4 mils, compensating for the target's angle relative to her position. But this time she made a deliberate error in her wind call. Calculated the drift at 12 miles per hour instead of 14. A subtle mistake. the kind that looked like pressure affecting judgment rather than incompetence. The shot impacted 6 inches right of center mass. Sterling's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. "Wind got you." "Yes, Chief." Target 3. Reese corrected her wind call, compensating properly, and placed the shot in the target's center mass. 2 hits, 1 miss. Respectable performance. Good enough to prove basic competency, not good enough to reveal her actual capability. Sterling collected the rifle and walked back toward the team area. Reese followed. Blackwood was waiting, arms crossed. "Assessment, Chief?" 2 out of 3 at 1,200. Second shot was off due to wind miscalculation. She's competent enough for observation duty, but I wouldn't trust her for critical engagement at extended range. Blackwood nodded, something like vindication in his eyes. Typical Army hype. Good enough for their standards, inadequate for ours. He looked at Reese. "You'll accompany us for observation and backup. No primary engagement responsibilities. We'll handle the tactical shooting if opportunities arise." "Understood, sir," Reese said, her tone betraying nothing. As the SEALs dispersed to prepare equipment, Sterling lingered. He studied Reese for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. "That second shot," he said quietly. "You adjusted your scope between first and second target. I saw you dial 0.2 mils left for wind, but your impact was right of center." Reese met his eyes, said nothing. Sterling's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gaze. Understanding, maybe respect. "Wind doesn't push a bullet from left to right when you've adjusted for it going that direction," he said. "That was either incompetence or theater, and your first shot says it wasn't incompetence." He walked away before Reese could respond, but she caught his words, spoken just loud enough for her to hear. "Interesting choice, Staff Sergeant. I wonder what you're hiding." 48 hours later, the cargo bay of the C-17 transport was a study in controlled chaos as it rumbled through the night sky at 30,000 feet above the Arabian Sea. 8 SEALs performed final equipment checks, their movements economical and practiced. Reese sat slightly apart, inventorying her gear for the 3rd time. Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle, semi-automatic .50 caliber. Effective range officially listed as 1,800 yards, though Reese had reliably engaged targets at 2,400. The weapon weighed 32 pounds fully loaded, kicked like an angry mule, and could punch through engine blocks. She had named it William after her grandfather. Her personal kit included enough ammunition for 20 shots, a Kestrel 5700 weather meter, laser rangefinder, spotting scope, and 3 notebooks filled with ballistic data, environmental tables, and trajectory calculations that looked more like doctoral-level physics research than military documentation. Blackwood moved through the bay, checking each man personally. When he reached Reese, he paused. "First combat operation with SEALs?" he asked. "First official operation, sir. I've provided support for 3 previous SEAL missions, but I wasn't formally attached to the units." "What were the missions?" "Classified, sir." Blackwood's jaw tightened. "Everything's classified these days." He glanced at her Barrett. "You know how to handle that cannon?" "Yes, sir." "It's not subtle. You fire that thing, every hostile for 5 miles knows exactly where you are." "Subtlety is contextual, sir. Sometimes the mission requires noise." Something almost like a smile touched Blackwood's face. "At least you're honest about it." He started to move away, then stopped. "My daughter wants to enlist. She's 19, smart, athletic, top of her class at everything she attempts. She asked me if women can really hack it in combat roles, or if it's just political theater." He looked at Reese directly. "What should I tell her?" Reese considered the question with the same care she applied to calculating windage. "Tell her that physics doesn't care about gender, politics, or opinion. A bullet fired with proper trajectory, velocity, and compensation will hit its target whether the shooter is male or female. Tell her that capability matters, Everything else is noise. Blackwood held her gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded. Fair answer. Chief Sterling approached as Blackwood moved away. Commander's testing you, he said quietly, seeing if you're ideological or practical. I noticed. For what it's worth, I think you're hiding something. I think that missed shot at the range was deliberate. I think you're a hell of a lot better than you showed us. Sterling's eyes were direct. My father served in Korea, 1951 to 53. He told me something I've never forgotten. Trust the quiet professionals. The ones who brag are compensating. The ones who stay silent are calculating. You're very quiet, Staff Sergeant. Quiet is efficient, Chief. That it is. Sterling smiled slightly. I'm betting on you. Don't make me look stupid. The loadmaster signaled 5 minutes to drop zone. Reese closed her eyes and visualized her grandfather's words. The lesson he'd written 79 years ago in that leather journal now secured in her tactical vest. She didn't need to reread it. The mathematics were burned into her memory. Focus replaced emotion. Cold calculation displaced hot rage. She would remember. The helicopter insertion was textbook. Fast, low, aggressive. The MH-60 Blackhawk skimmed 30 feet above the desert floor at 0342 hours local time, its pilots using night vision and terrain-following radar to navigate valleys and ridgelines that would hide them from enemy detection. They landed 2 miles from the target area, rotor wash creating a storm of sand and dust that obliterated visibility for 30 seconds. The SEALs flowed from the aircraft like smoke, spreading into defensive positions with the fluid coordination of a unit that had trained together for thousands of hours. Reese was last out, carrying the Barrett and 75 pounds of additional gear. Her boots hit the sand and she moved immediately toward Blackwood's position, rifle held at low ready. The Black Hawk lifted off before the dust had even settled, disappearing into the night sky with the characteristic whump, whump, whump that would fade to silence within 90 seconds. Move out, Blackwood ordered. 12 miles to observation point. We have 5 hours before sunrise. Stay tight, maintain noise discipline, and remember, this is enemy territory. Every shadow could be hostile. They moved through the desert like ghosts. The march took 4 hours and 17 minutes. The terrain was brutal. Sand dunes giving way to rocky hills, then valleys filled with loose shale that threatened to cascade noisily with every step. Temperature dropped to 48 degrees. Wind gusted inconsistently from multiple directions. Reese cataloged every variable: wind patterns, temperature gradients, humidity, barometric pressure. The data accumulated in her mind like layers of sedimentary rock, building toward the moment when she would need to convert information into precise action. They reached the observation point at 0759 hours, 19 minutes before sunrise. The position was a rocky outcropping on a ridgeline that provided clear line of sight to the target compound. Blackwood's team established security perimeters while Reese and Sterling moved to the forward observation post. Sterling pulled out his spotting scope. Reese assembled the Barrett with practiced efficiency, checking every component, every connection, every point of potential failure. Through her scope, the compound crystallized into focus. 2,247 yards away, nearly a mile and a half. The distance at which atmosphere became liquid, at which wind became a living thing, at which gravity exerted force that could only be calculated, never ignored. The compound consisted of 3 main buildings arranged in a triangular formation, guard towers at each corner, approximately 22 visible hostiles on perimeter patrol. The main structure, a 2-story building constructed of reinforced concrete, sat at the compound's center. Upper floor, northwest corner, large windows facing their position. That's where the generals would meet. High ground, good visibility, defensible position. Exactly where Reese would have chosen. Range? Blackwood asked, moving up beside them. 2,247 yards, Reese said. Wind currently 12 miles per hour from northwest, but gusting to 16. Temperature will climb to 75 by noon, changing air density. Humidity 31%. Barometric pressure 29.91 inches of mercury. Can you make a shot at that range? Reese looked through her scope at the distant windows, ran calculations, checked variables, measured probability against capability. Yes, she said simply. Blackwood stared at her. The world record for confirmed sniper kill is 2,475 yards. That was achieved under perfect conditions, with multiple ranging shots, by a shooter with 15 years of experience. You're telling me you can make 3 consecutive precision shots at 2,247 yards against human targets in combat conditions? Reese pulled out her weather-beaten notebook, filled with page after page of handwritten calculations. Sir, this documents every precision shot I've taken over 1,000 yards for the past 4 years. 94 engagements, environmental conditions, range data, corrections, outcomes. I've been preparing for this exact shot for 18 months. She flipped to a marked page. I've calculated it 127 different ways. Bullet drop will be 421 inches. Wind drift, accounting for gusting patterns, between 16 and 19 inches. Coriolis effect at this latitude adds 2.7 inches of rightward drift. Temperature gradients will cause approximately 3 inches of additional variation. Blackwood looked at Sterling. The chief's expression was thoughtful. She knows her numbers, Sterling said. Whether she can execute is another question. Sir, Reese said quietly, my grandfather made that distance in 1944 with equipment inferior to what I have now. I have modern optics, superior ammunition, and decades of accumulated ballistic research. The mathematics work. I just need authorization. Blackwood was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his radio and contacted JSOC Command. Phantom 6 to Control. Request confirmation on engagement authorization. The response took 30 seconds. Phantom 6, you are cleared hot on all 3 primary targets if opportunity presents. Priority Alpha authorization confirmed. This is a presidential directive. Blackwood looked at Reese. You miss even 1 shot, we compromise this operation and every future operation in this region. They'll triple security, move command structures, and we lose any intelligence advantage we built over 6 months of surveillance. Understood, sir. And if you're captured during extraction, this mission never existed. No backup, no rescue, no official acknowledgement. You'll die alone in an enemy prison, and your family will be told you died in a training accident. Copy that, sir. Blackwood studied her face for what felt like an eternity. Why are you really here, Staff Sergeant? And don't tell me it's duty. Soldiers volunteer for suicide missions for 2 reasons. They're running from something or towards something. Which one are you? Reese met his eyes. Both, sir. I'm running from the soldier who couldn't save her brother. I'm running toward the one who makes sure other soldiers don't have to bury theirs. The sun had cleared the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and shadow. In the compound 2,247 yards away, movement stirred in the upper windows. The meeting was about to begin. And Staff Sergeant Reese Catherine Marlo, granddaughter of Colonel William Marlo, daughter of precision, student of mathematics, bearer of her brother's dog tags and her family's legacy, settled behind her rifle and began the final calculations that would end a war. The desert sun climbed higher, transforming the landscape into a shimmering canvas of heat distortion and mirage. Through her Barrett's scope, Reese watched the compound ripple like water, atmospheric conditions creating optical illusions that could throw off calculations by inches or miles. She had been in position for 6 hours. 6 hours of absolute stillness, her body becoming part of the rocks and sand. 6 hours of watching patrol patterns, counting guards, memorizing the compound's rhythm. 6 hours of waiting for 3 men whose deaths would save thousands of lives. The SEAL team had spread out across the ridgeline, establishing overlapping fields of fire in security positions. They were invisible, buried in the terrain like seeds waiting for the right season to emerge. Blackwood maintained command position 15 yards behind Reese, coordinating with JSOC through encrypted communications. Sterling lay beside her, eye pressed to his spotting scope, serving as her second pair of eyes. "Thermal signature increasing on upper floor," Sterling murmured. "Count 14, no, 16 heat signatures. Meetings assembling." Reese adjusted her scope's focus with microscopic precision. The building's northwest windows came into crystal clarity despite the 2,247 yards between her and the target. She could see movement now, figures gathering around what appeared to be a large table covered with maps and documents. Her breathing had slowed to 6 breaths per minute. Her heart rate held steady at 48 beats per minute. This was the physiological state she had trained years to achieve, the zone where human limitations gave way to something approaching mechanical precision. The Kestrel weather meter mounted beside her rifle provided real-time atmospheric data. Temperature, 82 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing. Humidity, 31%. Wind, 12 miles per hour from northwest, gusting to 15. Barometric pressure, 29.91 inches of mercury. She ran the calculations again, checking her work, verifying every variable. Bullet drop at 2,247 yards with .50 caliber match-grade ammunition, 421 inches, 35 feet. The bullet would arc through the sky like an artillery shell, reaching an apex hundreds of feet above ground before gravity dragged it back down toward its target. Wind drift, the 12-mile-per-hour crosswind, would push the 661-grain projectile approximately 17 inches right during its 2.4-second flight. But the gusts complicated matters, creating variation that required intuition as much as calculation. Coriolis effect. At this latitude, Earth rotation would deflect the bullet 2.7 inches to the right. Most snipers never considered this factor. Most snipers never needed to. Temperature gradient. The bullet would pass through multiple layers of air at different temperatures, each one affecting velocity and trajectory in subtle ways. 3 inches of variation, possibly 4. Gyroscopic drift. The bullet's spin would cause it to drift slightly in the direction of its rotation. Another 1.2 inches right. Total compensation needed. Approximately 24 inches right, 421 inches up, with a margin of error smaller than a playing card. Movement on target, Sterling said. 3 individuals entering the room, distinctive uniforms, command-level insignia. Through her scope, Reese saw them clearly now. General Omar Nazari entered first. Short, stocky, a man whose body suggested decades of comfortable command rather than field experience. He moved to the table and began pointing at documents, his gestures animated, authoritative. General Faisal Qasim followed. Tall, thin, wearing glasses that caught the light from the windows. Intelligence chief, the man responsible for counterintelligence operations that had compromised coalition assets throughout the region. And then General Khalid al-Rahman stepped into view. Reese's heartbeat, which had been holding steady at 48, jumped to 63. She forced herself to breathe, forced the spike of adrenaline to dissipate, forced her training to override emotion. Cold mathematics replaced hot rage. Focus clarified where anger would have blinded. Rahman was exactly as his photographs had shown. Mid-50s, gray beard trimmed close, a scar above his left eyebrow. He stood near the window, backlit by sunlight, studying the maps spread across the table. This was the man who had orchestrated Daniel's death. The man whose strategic deception had killed 6 American soldiers and wounded 11 more. The man who considered that operation one of his greatest successes. Phantom, control. JSOC confirms all three primary targets are in position. You are cleared to engage at your discretion. Repeat, you are cleared hot. Blackwood's voice came through her earpiece. Marlo, what's your assessment? Reese's training took over, pushing emotion aside, replacing it with procedure. Three targets confirmed, all positioned near northwest-facing windows, upper floor. Range 2,247 yards. Current environmental conditions are optimal. Wind is variable but within calculated parameters. I have a firing solution. Chief Sterling, confirm spotter ready. Spotter ready, Sterling said. I have clear visual on all three targets. Blackwood moved closer, crouching beside Reese's position. His face was unreadable, but she could feel his doubt radiating like heat. Staff Sergeant, I need you to understand what you're claiming. That distance exceeds the effective range of your weapon system by nearly 500 yards. The probability calculations for hitting a human-sized target at that range, even once, approach the statistically improbable. You're telling me you can do it 3 times consecutively? Yes, sir. Why should I believe that? Reese pulled her eyes from the scope to look directly at Blackwood. Because I've spent 18 months preparing specifically for this shot, sir. Because mathematics doesn't lie. Physics is consistent. If the calculations are correct and the execution is precise, the outcome is predictable. She pulled out her weathered notebook, opening to a page filled with dense calculations and diagrams. My grandfather taught me that shooting isn't gambling, it's engineering. You don't hope the bullet hits. You calculate where it must go and place it there with precision. Blackwood studied the notebook, his eyes scanning the handwritten entries. Your grandfather, the one Colonel Ashford mentioned. Yes, sir. He taught me that capability transcends doctrine when mathematics supports execution. Sterling spoke quietly. Sir, I've been spotting for SEAL snipers for 20 years. I've worked with the best shooters in the world. This woman knows her numbers better than anyone I've ever seen. Whether she can execute is unknown, but her preparation is flawless. Blackwood was silent for 30 seconds. 40. A minute. Then he keyed his radio. Control, Phantom 6. Request final authorization for long-range engagement. 3 targets, 2,247 yards, single shooter. The response came immediately. Phantom 6, you have presidential authorization. If your shooter can make those shots, take them. But understand, failure compromises operational security throughout the entire theater. Blackwood looked at Reese one final time. If you miss, we extract immediately and burn this observation point. 3 years of intelligence work becomes worthless. Hundreds of follow-on operations get canceled, and soldiers die who might have lived. I won't miss, sir. How can you be that certain? Because uncertainty is just insufficient data, sir. I have the data, I have the training, I have the capability. The only variable left is authorization. Blackwood's jaw tightened. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. Take the shots. Reese's universe contracted to the circle of her scope. Everything else, the heat, the waiting SEALs, Blackwood's doubt, even the knowledge of who Raman was, faded into background noise. There was only the target, the calculations, and the trigger. Her grandfather had taught her to enter this state, a condition of absolute focus where conscious thought gave way to trained instinct, where mind and body merged into a single instrument calibrated for one purpose. Through the scope, she watched Raman gesture at the maps, watched Nazari nod in agreement, watched Kasim adjust his glasses and lean closer to examine something. 3 men who had orchestrated hundreds of attacks. 3 men whose deaths would save thousands of lives. 3 men standing in windows 2,247 yards away, believing themselves safe. Reese made her final adjustments. Scope elevation, 124.3 minutes of angle up. Scope windage, 8.7 minutes of angle right. She double-checked the calculations in her head. Triple-checked them. The numbers were correct. They had to be correct. Her finger found the trigger. The Barrett's trigger broke at 4 pounds of pressure. She had tested this particular rifle's trigger thousands of times, knew exactly how it felt in that microsecond before the sear released. "Ready," she whispered. Sterling pressed his eye harder against the spotting scope. "I have all 3 targets. Wind holding steady at 12 miles per hour. Call it when you're taking the shot." Reese's breathing slowed to the point of suspension. She exhaled half a breath and held it, reaching the moment between heartbeats where the body achieved perfect stillness. The first target was General Nazari, leftmost position, closest to the window frame. The easiest shot of the 3, relatively speaking. Mathematics, physics, precision. "Shot 1, Reese whispered, and squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared. The recoil hammered into her shoulder with tremendous force, but she had braced for it, absorbed it, maintained her sight picture through the scope. The massive .50 caliber bullet left the muzzle at 2,910 feet per second. It began its 2-4-second journey immediately, climbing through the air, arcing toward the apex of its trajectory, while crosswinds pushed it right and gravity dragged it down, and Earth's rotation influenced its flight path in ways invisible to the naked eye. Through her scope, Reese tracked its impact. General Nazari's head snapped back. His body collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. "Confirmed kill, target 1, Sterling said, his voice steady despite what he had just witnessed. But Reese was already acquiring target 2. General Qasim had turned toward the sound of Nazari's body hitting the floor. His profile presented a clean shot, perhaps cleaner than the first. His mouth was open, probably shouting orders or warnings. His hand was reaching towards something on his belt. He would never complete that movement. Reese had already calculated the compensation needed. Same range, slightly different angle, wind unchanged. Her second shot fired before Qasim could process what was happening. Another 2.4-second flight, another perfect arc through the desert air. Another bullet solving an equation written in flesh and blood. General Qasim's head exploded in a red mist. "Confirmed kill, target 2, Sterling said. His professional calm was cracking slightly. "Jesus Christ, she's actually doing it." Target 3, General Khalid al-Rahman, had realized they were under sniper attack. He was moving, diving toward cover, his survival instincts finally triggering despite the impossible distance. This shot was different, more complex. A moving target at 2,247 yards required predictive mathematics that bordered on divination. Reese had to calculate not where Rahman was, but where he would be in 2.4 seconds. Had to account for his speed, his direction, the probability that he would continue his current movement pattern. She led the target by exactly 6.3 feet, adjusted her aim point to intersect with where her calculations said Rahman's head would be when the bullet arrived. This was for Daniel, for every soldier killed by Rahman's deceptions, for every family that had received folded flags and empty condolences. But more than that, this was mathematics made manifest, physics given purpose, precision as justice. Reese's third shot broke clean. The bullet flew true. General Khalid al-Rahman's momentum carried him forward for another step before the .50 caliber round struck him precisely where Reese's calculations had predicted. His body crumpled mid-stride, lifeless, before he hit the floor. "Confirmed kill, target 3, Sterling whispered. "All 3 targets down. Total elapsed time, 12.3 seconds. The desert was suddenly alive with noise. Alarm sirens wailing in the compound. Guards running in confusion. Radio chatter erupting across enemy communication channels. Blackwood was staring at her, his expression somewhere between disbelief and awe. "Unfucking believable. You actually did it. 3 for 3 at over 2,200 yards. But Reese wasn't finished. Through her scope, she saw a fourth figure emerge from the building. Not in uniform, Western clothing, civilian appearance, but moving with purpose, carrying what looked like a document case. Her combat intelligence training triggered recognition. The figure's movement pattern was wrong, too practiced, too aware of cover and concealment. The document case was military grade, not commercial. His scanning pattern suggested professional training, CIA asset, or someone pretending to be. The figure was heading toward a vehicle, moving quickly, taking advantage of the chaos. Reese's mind processed information at combat speed. This person had been in the room during the meeting, had access to whatever intelligence the three generals had been discussing, was now fleeing with documents that could compromise American operations. Fourth target, Reese said, civilian clothing, carrying documents, heading to northeast vehicle. Negative, Blackwood snapped. You're not authorized for additional engagements. We need to extract now before they triangulate our position. Sir, that individual was in the meeting room. They have intelligence. Stand down, Staff Sergeant. That's an order. Through the scope, Reese saw the figure reach the vehicle, saw them throw the document case inside, saw them start to climb into the driver's seat. She had perhaps 3 seconds before the vehicle left her line of sight. 17 men survived who would have died. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. How many American soldiers would die if that intelligence reached enemy hands? How many operations would be compromised? How many families would receive folded flags because she had followed orders instead of following tactical assessment? Reese made her decision in 0.4 seconds. She fired. The fourth shot caught the figure in the head just as they were entering the vehicle. The body collapsed, half in, half out of the car, the document case falling into the sand. What the fuck? Blackwood was on her in an instant. I gave you a direct order to stand down. Sir, that target had classified documents and was fleeing the scene. Threat assessment indicated immediate engagement was necessary. That wasn't your call to make. Sterling was focused on his spotting scope. Commander, the fourth target. I'm seeing a weapon. Looks like a sidearm on the body. And those documents, they're marked with classification symbols. American classification symbols. Blackwood grabbed his radio. Control, Phantom 6. Fourth target engaged. Civilian clothing, armed, carrying what appears to be classified American intelligence documents. Request immediate identification. The response took 40 seconds, long enough for Reese to begin breaking down her shooting position, preparing for extraction. Long enough for her to wonder if she had just ended her career along with that fourth life. Phantom 6 control. Fourth target has been identified as Marcus Reinhardt, former CIA operative, suspected of selling classified intelligence to enemy forces. JSOC has been tracking him for 6 months, but couldn't get authorization for engagement due to diplomatic complications. Your shooter just solved a major counterintelligence problem. Well done. Extract immediately. Blackwood's expression shifted from anger to shock to something approaching respect. You just went off script and eliminated a traitor? Not accidentally, sir. Assessment indicated that individual's behavior was inconsistent with friendly personnel protocols. Movement pattern, equipment handling, situational awareness, all suggested professional training being used for evasion rather than legitimate activity. How the hell do you know counterintelligence markers? My mother taught applied behavioral analysis at MIT before she moved to pure physics. I read her research papers growing up. Pattern recognition is pattern recognition, whether it's bullet trajectories or human behavior. Sterling started laughing. Actual, genuine laughter. She shot a CIA traitor at 2,247 yards because she remembered her mother's academic research. Commander, I don't know whether to recommend her for a medal or a psychological evaluation. Both probably, Blackwood muttered. But there was a new note in his voice. The skepticism had burned away, replaced by the kind of professional respect that SEALs reserve for the genuinely exceptional. The compound below was chaos. Guards were firing blindly into the desert, their shots falling hundreds of yards short. Enemy forces were attempting to organize, but without their command structure, they were directionless, panicked. "All units, extract to Rally Point Alpha," Blackwood ordered. "We have approximately 15 minutes before they organize a pursuit. Move fast, move quiet, and stay together." The SEAL team collapsed their positions with practiced efficiency, gathering equipment, erasing signs of their presence. Within 90 seconds, they were moving down the ridgeline, heading away from the compound at a rapid pace that would have destroyed lesser soldiers. Reese moved with them, the Barrett slung across her back, her legs eating up ground with a stride her grandfather had taught her. The old colonel had believed that snipers needed to be capable infantry first, marksmen second. He had run her through these hills in Texas, building endurance that now kept pace with SEALs 20 pounds lighter and 6 years more experienced. They had covered 4 miles when the first enemy patrol found their observation point. By then, the SEAL team was already long gone, ghosts that had never existed, leaving behind only the memory of 4 impossible shots in the bodies they had created. Sterling fell in beside Reese as they moved through a rocky valley. "That second shot at the range, back at Coronado, you missed deliberately, didn't you?" "Yes, Chief." "Why?" "Because capability creates expectations, and expectations create responsibilities I wasn't authorized to accept at that moment. Commander Blackwood needed to see competence, not expertise. Expertise would have raised questions about why an Army sergeant had capabilities exceeding SEAL standards." Sterling nodded slowly. "You're a sneaky one, Staff Sergeant. I respect that." He paused. "My father served in Korea, 1951 to 53. He used to tell me about the snipers who worked in that war. Said they were different from regular soldiers. Said they had to be comfortable with isolation, with patience, with making decisions that affected outcomes they'd never see. He said the best snipers were the ones nobody noticed until the work was done." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was. Died in 2003. Cancer from exposure to training contamination, even though he never deployed beyond the peninsula. Just served his time and came home." Sterling's voice carried old grief, carefully managed. "He would have liked meeting you. He respected precision, said it was the closest thing to honor a soldier could achieve in combat." They moved in silence for another mile. Blackwood's voice came through the radio. "All units, enemy pursuit confirmed. Estimate 40 hostiles, 2 miles behind us and closing. Increase pace to double time. Rally Point Alpha in 6 miles. The team accelerated. The desert terrain was brutal. Loose sand giving way to rocky escarpments, then valleys filled with thorny vegetation that tore at clothing and skin. Temperature had climbed above 90 degrees. Each breath burned like inhaled fire. Reese's mind was already 3 moves ahead, calculating extraction routes, assessing threat vectors, preparing for the possibility that they would have to fight their way out. 2 miles from Rally Point Alpha, they heard the distinctive crack of rifle fire behind them. "Contact rear," one of the SEALs reported. "Enemy scouts have visual on our position." Blackwood made a decision instantly. "Sterling, Marlo, establish overwatch position on that ridgeline. Suppress pursuit while the team continues to extraction. We'll send the bird back for you once we're secure." It was a dangerous order, splitting the team, leaving 2 people behind to face 40 hostiles. But it was also the tactically sound decision. Slow the pursuit, buy time for the main element to escape. "Copy," Sterling said. He and Reese peeled off from the formation, scrambling up a rocky slope that provided elevation and clear fields of fire. The rest of the SEAL team disappeared into the terrain, moving toward the extraction helicopter that was inbound from a forward operating base. Reese and Sterling reached their position and immediately began setting up. Sterling with his M4 rifle and spotting scope, Reese with the Barrett, already calculating ranges and wind conditions for the engagement that was about to begin. 12 targets visible, Sterling said, his eye pressed to the scope. Range approximately 900 yards and closing. They're moving in standard patrol formation, following our trail. Reese acquired the lead target, a soldier in the point position, carrying what looked like a radio. Take out the communications, disrupt the coordination. Her fifth shot of the day was almost leisurely compared to the previous four. 900 yards was well within the Barrett's comfort zone. No extreme calculations needed, just steady aim and smooth trigger control. The radio operator went down. The enemy patrol immediately scattered, seeking cover, but they had no idea where the shot had come from. They were trained for close-range combat, not long-range precision engagement. Reese fired 6 more shots over the next 3 minutes, each one carefully aimed, each one hitting targets that would maximize disruption and fear. Not killing everyone, that would have been wasteful, but killing leaders, communications personnel, and anyone foolish enough to expose themselves while trying to organize a response. By the 4th kill, the enemy patrol had stopped advancing. By the 7th, they were retreating. "Pursuit broken," Sterling reported. "They're falling back to defensive positions. We bought the team 20 minutes. The radio crackled. "Overwatch element, this is Phantom 6. Primary extraction complete. Secondary bird inbound to your position. ETA 4 minutes. Mark your position with strobes." Sterling pulled out infrared strobes, visible only to aircraft with proper equipment. They would guide the helicopter directly to their position without advertising their location to enemy forces. The wait was the longest 4 minutes of Reese's life. Not because of fear. Fear was manageable, controllable, just another variable to account for in combat calculations. But because stillness after action created space for thoughts she had been suppressing for hours. She had killed General Khalid al-Rahman, the man who had killed Daniel, and she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure, no sense that justice had somehow balanced the scales of her brother's death. Just emptiness where she had expected relief. "You okay?" Sterling asked quietly, his eyes still on the desert, watching for renewed pursuit. "Yes, Chief. That's not a real answer. It's the only answer I have right now." Sterling nodded. "My father told me something else. He said the hardest part of combat isn't pulling the trigger. It's living with the trigger pulls afterward. Said some men celebrate their kills. Some men pretend they don't matter. But the good ones, they carry each one forward, remembering that every trigger pull was a human life ended, regardless of how necessary it was." The sound of rotor blades echoed off the valley walls. The Black Hawk came in fast and low, its door gunners scanning for threats. It touched down for exactly 16 seconds, long enough for Reese and Sterling to sprint aboard, long enough to verify all personnel were secure, short enough that enemy forces couldn't organize effective fire. Then they were airborne, climbing rapidly, the desert falling away beneath them. Reese looked back at the compound. Smoke was rising from multiple points. Emergency vehicles clustered around the building where 3 generals lay dead. The chaos she had created with 4 shots and 12 seconds of work. Blackwood was sitting across from her, his expression unreadable. "Marlo," he said finally, his voice barely audible over the helicopter's noise. "What you did today was the most incredible shooting I've witnessed in 16 years of special operations. 3 precision shots at a distance that exceeds the theoretical capabilities of your weapon system. And then a 4th shot that eliminated a counterintelligence threat we didn't even know existed. Thank you, sir." "I'm not finished." His eyes were hard. "You also disobeyed a direct order. You made a tactical decision that was outside your authorization. In most circumstances, that would result in disciplinary action, up to and including court-martial." Reese met his gaze. "I understand, sir, but these aren't most circumstances. That 4th shot saved American lives. The intelligence documents that Trader was carrying contain the names and locations of 187 covert assets. If that information had reached enemy hands, we would have lost our entire intelligence network in the region." He paused. "You made the right call, but you need to understand, The right call doesn't always protect you from the consequences. I do understand, sir. I made the decision with full knowledge that it might end my career, but I couldn't live with the alternative. Something shifted in Blackwood's expression. The last remnants of skepticism burned away, leaving only respect. Your grandfather would be proud, he said quietly, and so am I. The helicopter banked hard, heading toward the coalition airbase that would begin their journey home. Behind them, the desert was already erasing signs of their presence. Wind would cover their footprints. Time would fade the memories of witnesses. The official record would show that no American forces were in the area when 3 enemy generals mysteriously died. But in the classified archives where truth was preserved for those with clearance to know it, the after-action report would tell the real story. Staff Sergeant Reese Catherine Marlo. 4 shots, 4 kills. Range, 2,247 yards. The most strategically significant sniper engagement in modern military history. And unlike her grandfather's record, this one would at least exist in writing, preserved in vaults where legends became official, even if they could never become public. Reese closed her eyes and felt her brother's dog tags warm against her skin. Daniel was still dead. Raman's death hadn't changed that, hadn't brought closure or peace or any of the things people claimed revenge would provide. But thousands of soldiers would live because 3 generals were dead. Hundreds of intelligence assets would remain safe because a traitor was eliminated. Mathematics had saved lives, just like her grandfather had promised. And sometimes that had to be enough. The C-17 transport aircraft rumbled through the night sky at 35,000 feet, carrying 8 SEALs and 1 Army sniper back toward friendly territory. The cargo bay was dimly lit, filled with the constant drone of engines and the occasional creak of metal expanding and contracting with altitude changes. Reese sat apart from the main group, her Barrett disassembled and laid out on a canvas tarp. She cleaned each component with methodical precision, even though the weapon had functioned flawlessly. The ritual wasn't about necessity, it was about processing. Her hands needed something to do while her mind sorted through the previous 18 hours. 4 kills at extreme range, 1 unauthorized engagement that had somehow turned into a counterintelligence victory. 12 additional shots during the extraction that had broken enemy pursuit and saved the team. 16 trigger pulls. 16 lives ended. The mathematics were simple. The emotional accounting was more complex. Chief Sterling approached with 2 bottles of water and a ration pack. He sat down beside her without asking permission, which Reese appreciated. The SEALs had that quality. They treated you like furniture until you prove yourself, then treated you like family without ever explicitly acknowledging the transition. You should eat something, Sterling said, tossing her the ration pack. We've got another 6 hours in the air. Reese accepted it, but didn't open it immediately. Thank you, Chief. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of comfortable silence that forms between soldiers who have shared combat and survived it together. I've been spotting for snipers for 23 years, Sterling finally said. Worked with Marine Scout snipers, Army Special Forces, Delta operators, and SEAL snipers who could shoot the wings off a fly at 1,500 yards. I've seen incredible shooters, artists with rifles. He paused. But I've never seen anything like what you did today. That wasn't just excellent marksmanship. That was something else entirely. It was mathematics, Chief, nothing mystical about it. Maybe, but there's a difference between knowing the math and executing under pressure at a distance where the margin of error is measured in millimeters. You didn't just know the calculations, you trusted them absolutely. No hesitation, no second guessing, just cold precision. Sterling took a drink of water. That kind of confidence doesn't come from training alone. It comes from something deeper. Reese continued cleaning her rifle, her hands moving through the familiar motions. My grandfather used to say that precision is the only form of control we have in chaos. Everything else, Politics, strategy, diplomacy is just people arguing about what should happen. But physics doesn't argue. Mathematics doesn't negotiate. If you understand the rules and apply them correctly, the outcome is predictable. Is that why you volunteered for this mission? To prove that chaos can be controlled? The question hung in the air between them. Reese assembled the Barrett's trigger mechanism, testing the pull, ensuring everything seated correctly. One of the generals I killed today, General Rahman, he was responsible for my brother's death. He fed false intelligence to coalition forces 2 years ago. Deliberate misinformation designed to lure a patrol into an ambush. My brother was the patrol leader. He died in my arms while I waited for a medevac that arrived too late. Sterling was quiet for a long moment. So this was personal. It started personal, but somewhere between planning and execution, it became something else. Rahman didn't die because I wanted revenge. He died because his continued existence was mathematically incompatible with saving American lives. The calculus was simple. One life versus thousands. The equation solved itself. That's a cold way to look at killing. Cold keeps you functional, Chief. Hot gets you killed. Sterling smiled slightly. You sound like my father. He used to say emotion is a luxury that infantry can afford, but snipers can't. Said the moment you make it personal, you've already failed. Because personal feelings create bias, and bias destroys precision. Your father was right. Maybe. But he also said that the men who could completely separate from emotion, the ones who felt nothing, those weren't the dangerous ones. They were just sociopaths with training. The truly dangerous snipers were the ones who felt everything, but chose to set it aside for the duration of the mission. They could access emotion when needed and suppress it when required. That takes more strength than just being numb. Reese finished reassembling the Barrett and set it aside. She looked at Sterling directly. I cried after I shot Rahman. Just one tear, but I cried. Does that make me weak or strong? It makes you human. And in this profession, human is rare enough to be valuable. Commander Blackwood's voice cut through the cargo bay. Listen up. We'll be landing at Ramstein Air Base in 4 hours. You'll each have individual debriefs with JSOC representatives, followed by a classified after-action review. What happened today was a strategic success of the highest magnitude. 3 enemy generals eliminated, a counterintelligence threat neutralized, and the entire enemy command structure in the region has collapsed. He paused, his eyes finding Reese. Staff Sergeant Marlo, you'll have a separate debrief with some people whose names I don't know and whose authorization comes from levels I can't access. That tells me your shooting today was even more significant than I realized. The other SEALs had been listening. Now they looked at Reese with a mixture of respect and curiosity. In their world, being summoned by nameless authorities from classification levels above top secret meant you had either accomplished something extraordinary or screwed up in ways that would make history books. One of the younger SEALs, a kid named Patterson who couldn't have been more than 25, spoke up. Staff Sergeant, is it true you calculated those shots manually? Like in your head? The ballistic computer was available, Reese said, but yes, I verified the calculations manually. Computers can fail, mathematics doesn't. How the hell do you calculate Coriolis effect and wind drift and all that other stuff without a computer? Practice. I've been doing these calculations since I was 6 years old. By the time you've worked the same equations 10,000 times, they become automatic. Like you don't think about how to walk, your body just knows. My brain just knows ballistics. Patterson shook his head in amazement. That's insane. It's just training, Reese said, but she knew he was right. It was a little insane. Normal people didn't spend their childhood calculating bullet trajectories. Normal people didn't dream in differential equations. But the Marlos had never been normal people. The landing at Ramstein Air Base was routine. The debriefs were not. Reese spent 6 hours in windowless rooms with intelligence officers who asked the same questions from different angles, probing for inconsistencies, verifying her account against data from satellite imagery, drone footage, and signals intelligence. They wanted to know how she had identified Marcus Reinhardt as a threat, how she had made the decision to engage without authorization, whether she had any prior knowledge of his status as a suspected traitor. She answered honestly. The pattern recognition came from her mother's research. The decision came from tactical assessment in the moment. She had no prior knowledge of Reinhardt's identity. They didn't believe her at first. The timeline seemed too convenient. An Army sergeant with no counterintelligence training somehow recognizing a CIA traitor at 2,247 yards and eliminating him without orders. But the mathematics of her other shots supported her story. Someone with capabilities she had demonstrated didn't need luck or conspiracy to identify behavioral anomalies. She simply observed, processed, and acted. Eventually, they let her go. The final debrief was different. The room was smaller, more intimate, and sitting across from her was Colonel Thaddeus Ashford, whose presence at a classified Air Force base in Germany suggested this meeting had been planned long before the mission concluded. "Staff Sergeant," Ashford said, his pale blue eyes studying her with the intensity of a man reading a technical manual. "The preliminary assessment from JSOC is that your engagement today represents the most strategically significant sniper action since Carlos Hathcock. 3 high-value targets eliminated simultaneously at a range that exceeds documented human capability. A 4th target, a counterintelligence threat we've been tracking for months, eliminated as a bonus engagement." "Thank you, sir." "I'm not congratulating you. I'm stating facts." Ashford pulled out a folder. "The question now is what happens next. You've demonstrated capabilities that make you a strategic asset. Assets get used. Sometimes they get used until they break." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Ashford leaned forward. "Let me be explicit. What you did today will never be publicly acknowledged. Your personnel file will continue to list you as a routine Army sniper with standard qualifications. No medals, no recognition, no fame. You'll go back to whatever unit you're assigned to, and the official record will show you were never in theater when 3 generals mysteriously died." "That's acceptable, sir." "Is it? Because you just changed the course of a war. And the only people who will ever know are sitting in rooms like this one, reading reports with classification stamps that don't officially exist." Ashford's expression was unreadable. "Most soldiers want recognition, want their achievements recorded, want history to remember their names. You're telling me that doesn't matter to you?" Reese considered the question carefully. "My grandfather's achievement was classified for the same reason, because greatness challenges belief. He never complained, never sought recognition. When I asked him why, he said, 'The men who lived because that shot was taken, they know. They told their children and grandchildren. That's the only history that matters.' Your grandfather was a wise man." "Yes, sir, he was." Ashford opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. "These are intelligence assessments from the region where you operated. Enemy forces have fragmented without their command structure. Attacks against coalition personnel have dropped 93% in the past 72 hours. Intercepted communications show widespread confusion and fear. They're calling it the ghost strikes. 3 leaders killed by an invisible enemy at an impossible distance." He slid another photograph across the table. It showed the compound, taken from a satellite hours after the engagement. "They found your bullet casings, measured the distance from your position to the impact sites. Do you know what their ballistics experts concluded?" "That it was impossible, sir." "Exactly. They think we have some kind of experimental weapon system, railguns or directed energy weapons. They can't accept that a human being made those shots with a conventional rifle, which ironically makes your achievement more effective. They're not just scared of one exceptional shooter. They're scared of American technological superiority that doesn't actually exist. Ashford collected the photographs and returned them to the folder. You've created a strategic advantage through capability alone. That's rare, that's valuable, and that means you're going to receive offers. Organizations with acronyms you've heard of and some you haven't. People who will want to use your skills for operations that make today look simple. What would you recommend, sir? That depends on what you want from your career. Do you want to keep pulling triggers? Because there's always another target, always another threat, always another mission that needs the impossible to become routine. You could spend the next 20 years taking shots that officially never happen, eliminating problems that officially don't exist. Some soldiers thrive in that world, and some don't. Some realize that being a weapon is different from being a soldier. Soldiers serve their country. Weapons just get pointed at targets. Ashford's expression softened slightly. Your grandfather understood that distinction. After the war, he could have stayed in the military, could have become an instructor, could have spent decades shooting. Instead, he went home to Texas, raised a family, and only picked up a rifle to teach his granddaughter the difference between precision and violence. Reese was quiet for a long moment. What did he teach me, sir? That precision without purpose is just accuracy. But precision with purpose, that's something worth building a life around. The door opened. An officer Reese didn't recognize entered, carrying a small wooden case. He set it on the table and departed without speaking. Ashford opened the case. Inside, resting on blue velvet, was a Medal of Honor. Reese stared at it. "This is yours," Ashford said quietly, "for conspicuous gallantry at the risk of your life, above and beyond the call of duty, authorized by presidential directive." The ceremony occurred 3 hours ago in a classified location with 12 attendees. No photographs, no recording, no public announcement. "Sir, You eliminated 3 enemy commanders at a range that military doctrine considers impossible, using calculations you performed manually when your equipment failed. You then identified and eliminated a counterintelligence threat without authorization, making a split-second decision that saved 187 American intelligence assets from compromise. And during extraction under fire, you provided covering fire that ensured 0 friendly casualties despite being outnumbered 20-1. Ashford's voice carried absolute certainty. You earned this. The fact that you can never publicly wear it doesn't diminish its meaning. Reese reached out and touched the medal. The medal was cold beneath her fingers. This was the highest honor the United States military could bestow. Men had died earning these. Heroes whose names were carved in marble and taught in history books. And hers would be recorded in files that officially didn't exist. There's something else, Ashford said. He pulled out a second case, larger than the first. I told you your grandfather's M1 Garand was preserved in a classified Pentagon vault. What I didn't tell you was what else was preserved with it. He opened the case. Inside was her grandfather's rifle, the M1 Garand he had carried through 3 years of European combat. The wood stock was worn smooth from decades of handling. The barrel showed the patina of age and use. But the weapon had been maintained in perfect working condition. Every component still functional, still capable. Beside it was a worn leather journal, her grandfather's shooting log. And beneath both items was a plaque. Colonel William Marlo, 2,100 yards, Normandy, June 6, 1944. Unofficial record. 17 men survived who would have died. The Pentagon preserves weapons that make history, Ashford said. Your grandfather's rifle earned that recognition in 1944. Your Barrett earned it today. Both will be displayed together in the classified vault where true military history is kept safe from those who would doubt it. Tears burned at the corners of Reese's eyes. She blinked them away, but one escaped anyway, cutting a track down her cheek. Your grandfather wanted you to have his journal when you were ready, Ashford continued. I've been holding it for 6 years, waiting for the right moment. I think that moment is now. Reese accepted the journal with trembling hands. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed but still legible. She opened to the entry from June 6, 1944, the day her grandfather had made his legendary shot. The handwriting was precise, controlled. Each letter formed with the same attention to detail he had applied to every aspect of his life. Range, 2,100 yards. Wind, 18 to 22 miles per hour variable from northwest. Target, German artillery officer coordinating fire on Dog Green sector. Compensation, 36 inches drop, 41 inches wind drift. One shot, officer fell. Artillery fire ceased. 17 men survived who would have died. Mathematics saves lives. Anger blinds. Focus clarifies. Remember this always. To my granddaughter, if you're reading this, you have the gift. Use it wisely. Use it well. But remember, precision without compassion is just murder dressed in mathematics. Never forget the human cost of every shot, even when the shots are necessary. Love you always, Grandfather. Reese closed the journal and held it against her chest. Ashford stood. You have 30 days of leave authorized. Go home. Process what happened. Decide what kind of soldier you want to be. Then come back and we'll talk about your future. Yes, sir. And Reese? Ashford's use of her first name was deliberate, personal. Your grandfather would be proud, not just of the shots you made, but of the tear you cried afterward. Never lose that. 3 months later, the geopolitical situation in the region had transformed so completely that analysts were struggling to explain it. Enemy resistance had collapsed. Terrorist networks had fragmented. Coalition casualties had dropped to their lowest levels in 15 years. The intelligence community knew why. 3 generals removed from the equation had created a cascade effect that dismantled organized opposition throughout multiple theaters. It was the strategic equivalent of removing a keystone from an arch. The entire structure had collapsed without those critical support points. The public would never know. News reports attributed the change to diplomatic initiatives, improved local governance, and natural evolution of the conflict. No mention of impossible shots fired from impossible distances by an army sergeant whose name appeared nowhere in the official record. Reese spent those 3 months at the family ranch in Texas. She walked the land her ancestors had worked for 150 years. She stood in the shooting range where her grandfather had taught her to calculate wind drift before she could multiply fractions. She read his journal cover to cover, absorbing every entry, every lesson, every moment of wisdom he had preserved for her. And she came to understand something important. Her grandfather hadn't been a killer who happened to be good at math. He had been a protector who used mathematics as a tool for saving lives. The distinction mattered. Intent shaped outcome. Purpose defined meaning. On the 90th day of her leave, Reese received a phone call from Colonel Ashford. I have a proposal, he said without preamble. JSOC wants to establish a new training program. Project Artemis. 6 elite female snipers, trained to your standards, capable of operating at extended ranges that enemy forces consider impossible. You would lead the program, recruit the candidates, design the curriculum, transform them into operators who can replicate what you did. Why female snipers specifically, sir? Because enemy forces in multiple theaters have patterns of behavior that make female operators more effective in certain scenarios. They underestimate women, discount them as threats. That cognitive bias becomes a tactical advantage we can exploit. But more than that, you've proven that the skills required for extreme range precision shooting aren't gender dependent. They're training dependent. We want to prove that systematically. Reese walked to the window of her childhood bedroom. Outside, the Texas hill country stretched toward the horizon. The same landscape her grandfather had loved. The same soil that had grown 3 generations of Marlos who served their country in different ways. I'll do it on one condition, she said. Name it. I choose the candidates. No political pressure, no diversity quotas. No one gets into the program because of their last name or their connections. Only capability matters. Agreed. And one more thing, I want to select one candidate who is an Army, someone from a different service branch. Any particular candidate in mind? Commander Blackwood has a daughter, 19 years old. She's currently at West Point, top of her class academically, strong athletic performance, expressed interest in combat roles. I want to evaluate her for the program. Ashford was quiet for a moment. You want to train the daughter of the SEAL commander who doubted you? I want to train someone whose father learned important lessons about capability. That's the kind of family that produces exceptional operators, sir. The ones who can grow and adapt. I'll make the arrangements. Report to Fort Benning in 3 weeks. You'll have access to resources, facilities, and personnel authorization to build this program from the ground up. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. You're about to discover that training operators is harder than being one. Teaching someone to think the way you think, to see the way you see, that's a different kind of challenge. Ashford was right. Project Artemis launched 6 weeks later with 7 candidates selected from over 200 applicants. Reese had designed an evaluation process that tested not just marksmanship, but mathematical aptitude, physical endurance, psychological resilience, and the capacity to learn complex systems under pressure. The candidates represented every service branch: Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force, and one civilian with a physics PhD who had applied through a DARPA recruiting program. And Corporal Delaney Blackwood, 19 years old, with her father's steel gray eyes and her own particular brand of determination. The training was brutal. 18-hour days of classroom instruction in ballistics, meteorology, physics, and mathematics. Physical training that would have broken conventional soldiers. Live fire exercises at ranges extending from 1,000 to 2,500 yards. Psychological conditioning to manage the stress of taking human life at distances where targets became abstractions rather than people. 3 candidates washed out in the first month. One suffered a mental breakdown after her first simulated kill at extended range, unable to reconcile the mathematics of death with the emotional reality of ending life. Another failed the physical requirements, excellent marksmanship, but unable to carry the weight of equipment across the distances required for real-world operations. The third was dismissed for attitude. She had the skills but lacked the temperament for the isolation and patience that extreme-range sniping required. 4 remained. Delaney Blackwood was among them. The young woman had inherited more than her father's eyes. She had his tactical mind, his capacity to stay calm under pressure, and his willingness to accept correction without ego. But she also had something her father had taken 16 years to develop: the ability to trust people who didn't look like the traditional image of an elite operator. 6 months into the program, Reese took the 4 remaining candidates to a classified range in Nevada, where they would attempt their qualification shots. Each candidate would engage 3 targets at 2,000 yards, shorter than Reese's record, but still well beyond standard doctrine. The wind was howling at 20 miles per hour. Temperature was 95 degrees. Humidity was 12%. Conditions were deliberately harsh, designed to test capability under adversity. 3 candidates completed the qualification. Good shots, professional execution. They hit their targets consistently, managing the environmental variables with competence born of 6 months of intensive training. Then Delaney Blackwood stepped up to the firing line. Reese watched through her spotting scope as the young woman settled behind her rifle, watched her run through the checklist: range verification, wind assessment, temperature compensation, mental calculation of the full ballistic solution. Delaney's first shot was perfect, dead center on target 1. Her second shot was equally precise. Her third shot hit slightly low and left, still a kill, but not centered. After the shooting concluded, Reese approached Delaney's position. "Talk me through shot 3. What happened?" Delaney looked frustrated with herself. I second-guessed my wind call, thought the gusts were stronger than my initial assessment, adjusted for 18 miles per hour instead of 16. I was wrong. Why did you second-guess? Because the wind had been variable all day. I didn't trust the consistency. Reese nodded. You made a decision based on pattern recognition rather than immediate data. That's not wrong, it's just a different approach. Sometimes patterns matter more than individual data points. But in this case, the immediate data was correct and the pattern was misleading. You'll learn to distinguish between those situations with more experience. I failed the qualification. No, you hit all 3 targets. That's not failure, that's success with room for improvement. Focus on continuous refinement rather than perfect execution. If you wait for perfect conditions and perfect calculations, you'll never take the shot. You took the shot and hit the target. Everything else is refinement. Delaney looked surprised. You know my father? I worked with him on an operation 8 months ago. He learned an important lesson during our mission, that capability matters more than assumptions. He trusted me with the most dangerous shot of the war. Now he's trusting me with his daughter. That's the highest compliment a father can give. Something shifted in Delaney's expression, pride mixed with determination. I won't let you down. You already haven't. You're here. You qualified. You did the work. Everything else is just continuation of the process. The graduation ceremony for Project Artemis occurred 11 months after the program launched. 4 operators received their qualification certificates in a classified ceremony attended by 27 people, including Colonel Ashford, Commander Blackwood, and an admiral whose name Reese was not authorized to know. The 4 graduates were now officially designated as Extended Range Precision Marksmen, a classification that didn't exist in any public military documentation, but carried significant weight in the special operations community. They would deploy to different theaters, attached to different units, providing capabilities that would officially never be acknowledged. They would take shots that would change outcomes while remaining invisible to history. Just like Reese had done, just like her grandfather had done. After the ceremony concluded, Commander Blackwood approached Reese. His uniform displayed new ribbons. He had been promoted to lieutenant commander and awarded a Silver Star for actions in an operation she knew had been their shared mission 8 months prior. Staff Sergeant Marlo, he said formally, then more quietly, I owe you an apology. Sir? When you first joined my team, I doubted you, questioned your capabilities, made assumptions based on prejudice rather than evidence. I've spent the past year thinking about that, about how many other exceptional soldiers I've dismissed because they didn't fit my preconceptions. He glanced toward where Delaney stood talking with her fellow graduates. My daughter is one of the best shooters I've ever seen. She gets that from her mother's side. Her grandfather was a competitive marksman. But she also has something else, something you taught her. What's that, sir? Confidence without arrogance. The ability to trust her calculations absolutely while remaining humble enough to learn from mistakes. That's rare, and it came from you. She had the foundation, sir. I just helped her build on it. Blackwood smiled. You're being modest, but I'll accept that. He pulled something from his pocket, a sealed trident, identical to the one Sterling had given Reese after the mission. This isn't official. You're Army, not Navy. But in my assessment, you earned this 8 months ago when you carried my wounded ass 4 miles through hostile territory while providing covering fire that saved my team. SEALs take care of SEALs. And as far as I'm concerned, you're one of us. Reese accepted the trident, feeling the weight of it in her palm. Thank you, sir. This means more than you know. I know exactly what it means. It means I was wrong about you, learned from being wrong, and I'm grateful you were patient enough to teach me. He extended his hand. Thank you for training my daughter, and thank you for showing me that capability has no gender, only standards. They shook hands. Professional respect between soldiers who had shared combat and survived it together. 1 year after the mission that officially never happened, Reese received a package at the Fort Benning office where she now directed Project Artemis. The return address was simply marked Pentagon Vault Archives. Inside was a photograph. It showed 2 rifles mounted on a display board in what appeared to be a classified museum. On the left, her grandfather's M1 Garand from World War II. On the right, her Barrett M82A1, the weapon she had used for the mission that had earned her a classified Medal of Honor. Between the 2 rifles was a plaque with gold lettering. The Marlo Legacy, Colonel William Marlo, 2,100 yards, Normandy, June 6, 1944. Staff Sergeant Reese K. Marlo, 2,247 yards, 2020. 3 generations, 5 wars, 0 defeats. Mathematics saves lives. Anger blinds. Focus clarifies. Below the plaque was a smaller inscription. Some legends exist in silence to keep heroes safe. Attached to the photograph was a handwritten note from Colonel Ashford. Your grandfather's rifle and yours will remain here until the day classifications are lifted and these missions can be publicly acknowledged. That day may never come, but the rifles will wait, preserving the truth for those with clearance to see it. In the meantime, your real legacy isn't the shots you took or the records you broke. It's the 4 operators you trained who will train others. The exponential growth of capability. The transformation of impossible into routine across multiple generations. That's how you change the world. Not through individual achievement, but through systematic improvement of those who come after you. Well done, Staff Sergeant. Your grandfather would be proud. Reese pinned the photograph to the wall of her office, where it would remind her every day what this work meant. 2 years after the mission, intelligence assessments confirmed that the elimination of the 3 generals had permanently altered the strategic balance in the region. Enemy organizations had never recovered their command structure. Coalition casualties remained at historic lows. The war that had consumed American resources for 2 decades was effectively over, though politicians and generals would continue diplomatic and military operations for years to maintain appearances. 3 shots had ended it. 3 shots fired by a 24-year-old Army sergeant whose name would never appear in history books. But in the classified archives where truth waited for the future, the record was clear. Staff Sergeant Reese Catherine Marlo had changed the course of a war with precision, mathematics, and the patient application of skills her grandfather had taught her on a shooting range in Texas when she was 6 years old. 5 years after the mission, Reese stood once again at Arlington National Cemetery. But this time, she wasn't alone at Daniel's grave. Beside her stood 4 women wearing Army dress uniforms with distinctive qualification badges that most observers wouldn't recognize. Extended Range Precision Marksmen, graduates of Project Artemis who had deployed to combat theaters and returned with their own classified records of impossible shots made routine. Delaney Blackwood stood closest, now a lieutenant, having earned her commission and completed 2 combat deployments, where she had performed with distinction in missions that would never be publicly discussed. Your brother would be proud of what you built, Delaney said quietly. Reese touched the dog tag still warm against her skin beneath her uniform. He would be proud that his death led to something constructive. That loss transformed into something that preserves life rather than just taking it. Is that what we do? Save lives by taking them? Yes. The mathematics are simple. Every high-value target we eliminate is a commander who can't order attacks, an intelligence officer who can't compromise assets, a logistics coordinator who can't supply operations. Each shot prevents dozens or hundreds of future casualties. The moral calculus is uncomfortable, but it's accurate. One of the other graduates, Captain Sarah Chen, a former Air Force intelligence analyst who had retrained as a sniper, spoke up. Do you ever regret it? The killing, I mean, even when it's necessary? Reese considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the world contains people whose existence is incompatible with peace. But I don't regret the shots themselves. Each one was mathematically correct. Each one saved more lives than it took. My grandfather taught me that if you're going to be a weapon, be a precise one. Imprecise weapons create collateral damage. Precise weapons solve problems. They stood in silence for a moment. 5 women who had killed in service of their country. 5 women whose achievements would remain classified for decades. 5 women who had proven that capability transcended every prejudice and assumption about what soldiers could be. I have a question, Delaney said. Why did you choose to become an instructor instead of continuing operational work? You could still be taking shots, still be in the field. Because operational work is about individual achievement. Training is about exponential impact. I can take one impossible shot, or I can teach 4 people who each teach 4 more. After 3 generations, that's 64 operators with capabilities that didn't exist before. That's how you change military doctrine. That's how you transform impossible into standard. So we're your legacy. No, you're your own legacy. I just helped you access capabilities you already possessed. The work you do now, the operators you'll eventually train, that's yours. I'm just the link in a chain that started with my grandfather and will continue long after I'm gone. Captain Chen smiled. That's a very long-term perspective. Precision shooting requires long-term thinking. You're calculating trajectories that take multiple seconds to complete, planning for wind patterns that will exist in the future, accounting for Earth's rotation during your bullet's flight. If you can't think 3 seconds ahead, you can't make the shot. If you can't think 3 generations ahead, you can't build something that lasts. They visited for another 20 minutes, sharing stories from recent deployments, discussing technical challenges they had encountered, planning future training iterations that would continue to push the boundaries of what military snipers could achieve. As they prepared to leave, Delaney handed Reese a small wooden case. My father wanted you to have this. He said you'd understand what it meant. Inside was a steel trident, not the informal one Commander Blackwood had given her years ago, but an official one, engraved with a date and a simple inscription. Honorary Seal, earned through combat, recognized through respect. He pulled strings, Delaney explained, got authorization from the Navy brass, said that anyone who could carry a wounded SEAL commander 4 miles under fire while eliminating threats at extended range had earned the right to be recognized as one of them, regardless of service branch. Reese held the trident, feeling the weight of recognition from a community that granted respect sparingly and meant it absolutely. Tell your father thank you, she said, and tell him that the best thank you I can offer is continuing to train operators who live up to the standards his community established. 10 years after the mission that officially never happened, Colonel Reese Marlo, promoted through the ranks faster than normal due to achievements that couldn't be publicly cited, stood in a classified briefing room at the Pentagon. She was 44 years old now. Her hair carried threads of gray. Her eyes held the weight of a decade spent training operators, and occasionally, when necessary, deploying herself for missions that required capabilities only she possessed. Project Artemis had expanded beyond her wildest projections. 47 graduates now, men and women representing every service branch. Operators who had collectively accumulated 312 confirmed eliminations at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards. Missions that had saved thousands of lives by removing threats with surgical precision. The briefing was for a new initiative, Project Achilles, a joint program between American and Allied Special Operations Forces designed to establish international standards for extended-range precision engagement. Colonel Marlo will lead the development of training protocols, Admiral Richardson explained to the assembled officers. Her experience establishing Project Artemis makes her uniquely qualified to expand these capabilities across multiple nations and service branches. After the briefing, Reese returned to her office and found a letter waiting. The envelope was weathered, The paper inside yellowed with age. The postmark showed it had been held in storage since 1996. 27 years in bureaucratic limbo, finally released because someone had flagged it for delivery when certain conditions were met. It was from her grandfather. My dear Reese, if you're reading this, then two things are true. First, I'm gone. Second, you've achieved something significant enough that military bureaucrats decided you earned the right to receive letters I wrote before your birth. I'm writing this in 1996. You're 2 years old. I've been teaching you to calculate trajectories since you were old enough to hold a pencil. Your mother thinks I'm crazy. Your father understands. He grew up the same way. I want you to know something important. The gift you have, the ability to see mathematics in everything, to calculate solutions while others see only problems, that's powerful. But power without purpose is just potential wasted. I took my shot in 1944 because 17 men would have died if I didn't. I calculated the trajectory, compensated for the wind, and pulled the trigger because mathematics gave me the power to save lives. That's the only justification for what we do. Not glory, not recognition, not personal satisfaction. Just the cold calculus that says one life taken can prevent dozens lost. You'll face this equation repeatedly throughout your career. Each time you'll have to decide whether the mathematics justify the action. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. Trust your calculations, but never forget that every number represents a human life. I love you. I'm proud of you, and I know you'll use this gift wisely. Your grandfather, Colonel William Marlo. Reese read the letter 3 times. Then she carefully folded it and placed it in the frame beside the photograph of the 2 rifles. Her grandfather's M1 Garand and her Barrett M82A1, mounted together in a classified vault where legends waited in silence. She had spent 10 years building on a legacy, training operators, expanding capabilities, transforming impossible into routine across multiple generations of soldiers who would carry the work forward. But reading her grandfather's letter, written when she was 2 years old, made her realize something profound. She wasn't building a legacy, she was continuing one. The chain stretched backward to her grandfather and forward to every operator she trained. Each link was a life spent pursuing precision, using mathematics to save lives, carrying forward the simple principle that capability married to purpose could change the world, one calculated shot at a time. And somewhere in the future, perhaps decades or centuries ahead, when classifications were finally lifted and historians could access the truth preserved in classified archives, they would see 2 rifles mounted side by side. Colonel William Marlo's M1 Garand from 1944, Colonel Reese Catherine Marlo's Barrett M82A1 from 2023. And between them, a simple inscription that told a story spanning 3 generations, 5 wars, and countless lives saved through the precise application of mathematics to chaos. Some legends exist in silence to keep heroes safe, but silence doesn't erase truth. It preserves it, waiting for the moment when the world is ready to know that impossible is just another word for a problem that hasn't met the right mathematician with a rifle. 15 years after that morning in Arlington Cemetery, on a crisp autumn day in 2038, Reese Catherine Marlo returned to her grandfather's ranch in Texas. She was 49 now, retired from active duty with the rank of Brigadier General, a promotion that came with no public ceremony, recorded only in classified personnel files. Project Artemis had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. 147 graduates across 12 nations, 1,847 confirmed eliminations at extreme range, countless lives saved through precision that made the impossible routine. But today wasn't about numbers. Today was about legacy. Delaney Blackwood, now Major Blackwood, decorated combat veteran, commander of Project Artemis's International Training Division, stood beside her at the family shooting range. Between them, a teenager with dark hair and emerald eyes checked the zero on a custom rifle. "Grandmother," the girl said, her voice steady, "range is 2,500 yards. Wind 12 miles per hour from the northwest. Target is positioned at—" "Don't tell me the target location," Reese interrupted gently. "Tell me the mathematics." The girl, Sergeant Marlo, fourth generation, just graduated from the program her great-great-grandfather had unknowingly started in 1944, smiled. "Bullet drop, 458 inches. Wind drift, 19 inches accounting for gusts. Coriolis effect, 2.9 inches right. Temperature gradient, 4 inches variation. Total compensation calculated and verified." She rattled off the calculations with the ease of someone who'd been learning ballistics since she could multiply fractions. Just like Reese had, just like her grandfather had taught her. The girl settled behind the rifle, breathed in, exhaled half, held. Between heartbeats, there was a moment of perfect stillness. The shot broke clean. 2,500 yards away, 147 yards farther than Reese's record, the target fell. Delaney checked through the spotting scope. Dead center, new family record. Reese felt tears on her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. These weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of completion. 4 generations, 106 years. From her grandfather's 2,100-yard shot on D-Day to her granddaughter's 2,500-yard shot today. The mathematics had evolved. The technology had improved, but the core principle remained unchanged. Precision with purpose. Mathematics in service of life. Capability transformed into legacy. "Grandmother," the girl was looking at her with concern. "Are you okay?" Reese pulled her into a hug. Over the teenager's shoulder, she could see the 3 rifles mounted on the wall of the range house. Her grandfather's M1 Garand from 1944, her own Barrett M82A1 from 2023, and now space for a 4th. "I'm perfect, sweetheart," Reese whispered. "Your great-great-grandfather would be so proud. Not because you broke my record, but because you remembered what matters most." "What's that?" "That every shot is a choice. That mathematics gives us power, but purpose gives us meaning. That legends aren't built from records broken. They're built from lives saved, from knowledge passed forward, from the quiet conviction that impossible is just another word for not yet calculated." The girl smiled. "Focus clarifies. Mathematics saves lives." Exactly. As the sun set over the Texas hill country, painting the landscape in golden shadow, Reese Catherine Marlo, granddaughter, soldier, teacher, mother, grandmother, understood that her journey was complete. She had started as a girl learning to shoot, became a soldier learning when precision served justice, evolved into a teacher learning to multiply capability, and ended as a grandmother watching the chain continue forward into generations she would never see. The rifles would wait in their vault. The records would wait in their files. But the legacy, the real legacy, was walking, breathing, calculating trajectories, and choosing when to pull the trigger. Some legends exist in silence to keep heroes safe, but some legends live in the eyes of a teenager who just made an impossible shot and understood that the mathematics matter less than the meaning behind them. That evening, as 4 generations of Marlo women sat on the ranch house porch, Reese, her daughter, herself a retired Army officer, Delaney, and the young sergeant, the girl asked the question that every Marlo eventually asked. "Grandmother, how many lives do you think we've saved? All of us, across all the generations." Reese looked at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, her grandfather's spirit was watching, her brothers too. All the soldiers who had lived because someone had made an impossible shot at the right moment. Thousands, sweetheart, tens of thousands. But we'll never know the exact number, because the lives we save don't get counted, they just get lived. Children who grow up with fathers who came home, parents who don't bury their sons, soldiers who retire and become teachers, doctors, builders. That's the mathematics we can't calculate, the exponential effect of life preserved. The girl nodded, understanding settling over her young face like sunrise. And in that moment, Reese knew the chain would hold. The legacy would continue. The mathematics would endure. One precise shot at a time, one generation at a time, forever.